Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning for our Disruptive Trends to Watch in 2023 conversation. I'm Lauren Hine. I'm the Head of Advisor Relations at Robo Global. I'm here with our research team, our esteemed industry experts, Jeremy Caprone, my Director of Research, Lisa Chai, our Senior Research Analyst, and Zeno Mercer, our Research Analyst. And we're going to cover the technologies that really excite us going into the new year. First things first, you can download this report at roboglobal.com, and they should have been emailed out to you at registration as well. So they should be sitting in your inbox if you'd like to follow along with our conversation. Our 5 trends to watch this year, in the order that we're going to discuss them today. Number 1, liquid biopsy will enable early stage cancer detection. Number 2, autonomy will redefine mobility. Number 3, now entering a world of connected care. 4, AR/VR will break barriers between the physical and digital worlds. And our final exciting trend for 2023 is reshoring will drive an automation revolution. So first question, I guess, is kind of open to everybody. Then we'll start in with the liquid biopsy conversation with Zeno. How did you guys arrive at these 5 trends for the year?
Well, look, at Robo, we think robotics, AI, healthcare technologies are a set of technologies that can be applied to so many industries, very much like the internet over the past 20 years. And in the last few years, we hit an inflection point, and we've seen machine intelligence significantly widen the range of possible applications. So a decade ago, it was essentially about robots automating the manufacturing of cars. But in the last few years, we saw robots coming out of the factory and find tremendous applications in so many areas: warehouses, logistics. We have flying robots. We have robots driving cars and trucks. We have surgical robots. We have automated systems all around us in labs, in transportation. So there were so many areas to pick from, and so we narrowed down to those 5 trends because we believe they will have an important impact on investment strategies over the next few years.
And I did look at the 2022 trend, or excuse me, the 2022 trends report, and there's some continuity there from what you guys were excited about last year for sure. Zeno, I'm going to start with you. Talk to us about liquid biopsies, early stage cancer detection, and kind of walk us through this first segment of the report.
Right. So one of the first trend that we highlighted for 2023 is the concept known as liquid biopsy, which is essentially the ability to detect cancer in the blood. The goal being to detect it earlier and at less cost invasiveness to prevent, the spread from stage 1 to stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 cancer, and ultimately, provide an outlet and ability for more people to get treatment for cancer. So I think one thing to think about here is, first, what is liquid biopsy? Essentially, it's detecting tumor DNA in the blood. This builds upon years and years of technology advancements, both hardware and software, that has allowed companies to go out and market products, get FDA approval really, and then get insurance reimbursement from the tech, from providing these services because they validated the clinical efficacy of this. But ultimately, liquid biopsy is a technology that we really believe will take off in 2023 with new approvals and increased uptake of people utilizing this going forward.
Do you have any specific companies that are within any of our indexes that excite you in this technology? What would you say is maybe like the exposure within any of our indexes by a percentage basis? Like, give us some advice here.
Okay, so I'll start kind of with your second question here. So our exposure and how we look at the subsectors, if you will, that we have connected to liquid biopsy. It would be remiss to talk about liquid biopsy without talking about the genomic space. And we have about 11% exposure to the genomic space through companies such as Illumina. So Illumina really is a pioneer of DNA sequencing, which is truly enabling the liquid biopsy space to act and work. So, Illumina also pioneered one of the first. I guess they weren't really the first to market with a liquid biopsy, but they had an interesting story where essentially they were doing non-invasive prenatal testing in 2013 on women who were pregnant to detect if their children had, their babies that were still in the womb had any genetic diseases, NIPT, non-invasive prenatal testing. What they found, though, was that they actually detected cancer tumor DNA in the samples they received. And they realized that, hey, we're finding cancer in women, and some of these people might not know they have it. So they actually went out and reached out to all the people that had submitted samples, and they actually discovered that, yes, many indeed had no indication, no symptoms, no diagnosis, anything. And so what they realized is that, hey, we're onto something here. And, we can actually detect cancer in blood like that. Now, they're not the only ones who have done this. In fact, another company called Guardant Health had actually already been a little further along in progressing their Guardant 360 device or assay, really, which can detect cancer early as well. So those are two different companies that we have. There's also a third, Veracyte, which has a number of products that are detecting specific cancers, such as lung cancer, thyroid cancer, and prostate cancer that are already in the market today and available to people for use and getting for utilization. So doctors are prescribing this if they have, any symptoms or if they're a high-risk population. Back to Grail, though, which is the company that Illumina spun out. But essentially, Grail has a pan-cancer test that can detect over 50 different types of cancers. And this is available to the general public now, but it's currently about $850 a test, and it's not covered by insurance. So that is in their pipeline to try to get covered in the next several years. But, for example, you thought you might have cancer or it was unsure, a doctor could actually prescribe this test, though there would be an out-of-pocket pay for $850 currently. But if you think about how much less expensive that would be than waiting years to detect and find a later stage cancer, you can really start to see the benefit here of how early cancer detection at that baseline price, if it gets covered, could be very impactful for the healthcare ecosystem and individuals' lives.
Is there a world that you envision in the near future where we'll go in for routine blood work and start doing some like standard cancer screenings at that point?
Yes. So in the future, liquid biopsy will probably be a part of yearly or biannual screening for people. It could depend, maybe there's a specific cancer that is higher risk for an individual and if that test were cheaper, maybe that would be the test that would be opted in for. But ultimately, as the cost of sequencing goes down, as this technology improves and scales out, and they can have improved economies of scale from the cost structure, you'll definitely start to see liquid biopsy more of an annual screening, and cancer detection rates would technically go up, but the stage at which cancer is detected would go down, which would improve the survival rates of many, many people. You have disparities of 5, 10, 20x of survival rates for many cancers, and many of those which don't have a proper or established protocol for detection. So this is really game-changing technology that we believe will have rapid adoption ramping up in the next several years.
So to tie this back to our H-Tech index, primarily these companies you consider in the genomic subsector. Are there other kind of secondary subsectors that are touching this?
Yeah, so while I started with genomics as kind of the core, we also have the diagnostic subsector, which is 15% of our index, and the process automation. So if you think about how the liquid biopsy process works, you have companies that are building specific assays that can go and either collect or detect the cancer itself, but there's also lab process automation. It has to be collected, it has to be securely transported back to a lab. It's not being done on site, generally speaking. And then another kind of secondary market that we also have exposure to here is the precision medicine side. So while earlier cancer detection is a great thing and can provide better outcomes, on the other end of the spectrum, the actual treatment protocols in place are being greatly enhanced through the development of precision medicine with CAR T therapies, CAR NK therapies, and other precision medicine that can target the cancer without more of a shotgun approach like chemotherapy and and other methods. So we're really excited about kind of seeing early detection met with more precise medicine having an enabling effect of reducing cancer mortality rates and the overall cost of and burden of cancer from both an economic and opportunity cost for people.
Awesome. So, definitely something that touches everybody. So thank you so much for that kind of outlook. Jeremy, I'm going to pivot over to you. Let's talk about autonomy redefining mobility. And actually, this is kind of an extension of two of the themes from last year's report, that robots are coming to save the supply chain and that a factory automation super cycle is here. So maybe a good place to start is talking about like the biggest growth opportunities in mobility and connected vehicles in the next upcoming year.
Sure. Well, look here, the key word is autonomy. And autonomy is the next step of development for machines. And so until recently, automation was really about programming machines and computers to do repetitive things in a very systematic way, very fast and accurately. Now, with the advent of machine intelligence, we're able to push it to the next level, which is autonomy and systems that can make decisions based on their environment and how it changes. And so that's been enabled by tremendous progress in terms of computing power, in terms of gathering strong data sets and running machine learning onto them, and then in terms of actuation and how those machines are able to react really fast. So of course, we're all talking about autonomous cars, and that's kind of the holy grail out there. And frankly speaking, we're getting close. We've seen the start of the first robotaxi services, commercial services being launched in the United States over the last couple of years. So that's coming really fast. But we think that's just the tip of the iceberg. And in reality, autonomous mobility is gaining a lot of traction in areas that you may not be aware of. And one of the most promising areas in our view is really in the warehouse. So it goes back to what you were saying, Lauren, about warehouse automation. In fact, there are hundreds of thousands of autonomous mobile robots operating today in distribution centers for e-commerce and in other areas of the supply chain. We think that's probably the faster growing and most exciting piece of autonomous mobility from an investor's perspective today. There's a lot of companies involved in this area, many of which are in the Robo Index.
Do you envision, I want to ask you next about the companies specifically in the Robo Index, but do you envision a world in the future where warehouses are fully autonomous without any humans present there at all? Maybe not 2023, but further out?
Yeah, that's certainly the direction we're taking. And if you think about how manufacturing has become very much automated, areas like automotive and consumer electronics and things like that, those manufacturers are tending towards what we call the light out factory, where you basically can lights because there's no one in there. And we're not quite there yet today, but I think the goal for supply chains and warehouses and distribution centers is very similar. But today, we're so far from that. In fact, here in the United States, we have more than 17,000 warehouses, and a low single-digit percentage of those are automated today. So there's a long way in terms of adopting all sorts of automation equipment first, and then moving to autonomous mobile robots, and ultimately the lights out warehouse.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so easy segue to companies that are going to benefit as we do more autonomous systems with logistics and manufacturing automation. So what are some of your favorite companies? I'm assuming most of these are in the Robo Index specifically.
Yeah, so we think supply chain optimization, and warehouse automation and real-time inventory management are the real focus here. And you'll find in the Robo Index many companies involved in warehouse and logistics automation. You've got all sorts of different business models. You've got companies like Zebra Technologies here in the US that do real-time asset tracking, the tracking and tracing of components or parcels in a supply chain. You'll find companies like Kion in Germany that does logistics automation solutions for the big players, or Daifuku in Japan, that's the world leader in material handling equipment. You'll find software businesses like Manhattan Associates, that's a US-based software company that does warehouse management systems, or I can think of AutoStore that's based in Scandinavia that does very compact automated storage systems, and that's gained a lot of traction, and that went public last year.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to drag you back really quickly to autonomous vehicles. Maybe let's first stop with electric vehicles. Do you see a transition in the near future till all the cars on the roads will be electric? And then the next step will be kind of autonomous vehicles. And then I want to talk about companies that are going to benefit from growth in those areas specifically.
Yeah, we certainly think that electric vehicles offer a lot of advantages over traditional combustion engine-based vehicles, and the benefits are so enormous that the market is going to shift naturally towards that. The big question mark is over the pace of this transition, and we can debate around that, but the trend is very clear and is very powerful. And if you look at investments being made by OEMs, we've seen a dramatic shift over the past 2 to 3 years in terms of allocating to EVs. So that trend is firmly in place, and it's important because an electric car is essentially a much simpler car than a combustion engine-based car. There's less moving parts, the maintenance is easier, the design is easier, but you need very significant investments in terms of production assets to deliver those. In terms of the beneficiaries of the more electric and smart cars, we see a lot around the semiconductor industry and the companies that deliver the chips that are used for the compute side or for the computer vision side. And in Robo, you'll find companies like Ambarella that does computer vision on a chip and whose technology is embedded in the next generation of vehicles. Or you'll find companies like Qualcomm and NVIDIA and Hexagon also in Europe.
Okay, something in the report that we haven't talked about yet is drone technology, specifically for kind of a last mile delivery solution. Is that something you think is realistic? Is that something we think is affordable? And do we have any drone exposure within Robo?
Yes, drones we regard as flying robots. And we think there's a huge market potential for this type of technology. And today, it's still more of a niche, but all the big players are experimenting with drones, from delivery applications to inventory management indoor. We think right now, on the commercial side, there's a great opportunity to use drone for the monitoring and surveillance and surveying outdoor. It can be public infrastructure, it can be power utilities, it can be used in mining and construction and agriculture. And that's where autonomous drones are gaining traction right now. So in terms of exposure within Robo, it's once again going to be on the chip side, and companies like NVIDIA and Analog Devices are involved there. Ambarella and Qualcomm are key providers of chips that are being used in drones, and especially autonomous drones.
Is the FAA on board with this? And are we actually doing any drone delivery in the US at this point?
This remains all experimental at this stage, especially in the US, where we have a strong regulation of the airspace. But we started to see some companies obtain authorization to operate autonomous drones beyond the visual line of sight, which means that you don't need a pilot on the ground with a line of sight onto the drone. And so that's a significant milestone that we just crossed. And so you're probably going to see a lot more deployments going forward.
Very cool. All right. Thank you, Jeremy. We're going to come back to you in a bit, but first, Lisa, let's talk about how we're entering a world of well-connected care. We're going to talk a lot about the Internet of Things in this section. So maybe also define the Internet of Things before we really get going and talk about healthcare applications for the IoT.
No, definitely. I think, primarily what you're really seeing is that the healthcare industry is really going through this major transformation, right? Driven by rising costs, physician burnout, lack of nurses, and patients definitely demanding just better healthcare. Who likes their healthcare process and their plans, right? So we're really seeing advancements right now in healthcare technology. And we think that next year is really a strong year for areas like personalized medicine and areas like IoT that you mentioned. So medical IoT, we're super bullish. We think right now these medical devices that are wearable and portable are really needed. They're non-invasive, and it provides real-time monitoring and improving patient experience around access to healthcare data and connecting them to healthcare providers. So we're really bullish as a technology that has really improved through better cloud technologies and better Wi-Fi connectivity and adoption of AI. AI is finally here in healthcare. So we now have devices that you can wear that are wearable sensors that track real-time healthcare data. So physicians can keep an eye on you as you leave the hospital or the doctor's office.
Very much hearing an extension of last year's theme that data analytics and AI are going to drive efficiencies in healthcare. It sounds like that was pretty spot on last year. Talk to me a little bit about companies within the health tech index. I'm assuming there's also some crossover with the artificial intelligence index, but companies that are really integral to this space, to this developing technology.
Yes, within the healthcare technology innovation strategy, we have two subsectors where that really captures this exposure. One area is in the medical instruments. So these are companies that not just provide surgical tools, but also the IoT devices. And then the other subsector would be the telehealth. And these two subsectors really capture this bullish trend that we're going to see in 2023 with tremendous amount of growth behind it. Some of the index members that are really leading this transformation are companies like Dexcom. Dexcom has developed a transmitter device that you wear that measures and sends real-time glucose data wirelessly to the physician. So you don't need to have this painful fingerprint that's very invasive. So they've really changed the game. Index members like iRhythm, Abbott, Medtronic are also companies that have really led the revolution transformation around cardiac monitoring devices. So whether it's using cardiac monitors or oximeters, certain type of pacemakers, you're definitely seeing the cardiovascular market really transforming, where it's non-invasive, they're portable, and you're able to communicate with your physicians, and they could keep an eye on you as you leave the hospital for surgical procedures. So these are really game-changing in our minds, and we think that the H-Tech strategy really captures many of these companies that are really transforming healthcare.
Okay, so I'm hearing that these seem to be right now used in more kind of post-care, after-care patient follow-up applications. Is there a world where we use more kind of medical IoT in diagnostics, or do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I think you're going to see both of these wearables that give you the biosensing technologies, right? So it could measure your heartbeat and kind of alert and give you detection on whether you're about to have some healthcare issues. So you're definitely seeing a world converging of that diagnostic, giving that real-time alert. And then the AI really improving and helping the analytics side. And now because the cloud has really improved and the Wi-Fi connectivity has really improved, we're able to get the data really quickly and get the medical help that you really need. So you got the diagnostic side and obviously on the post-surgical side. And that's very important because that really allows you to have a less hospital stay. And that's you're gonna have a better patient outcome. And also the insurers and healthcare companies are also going to see lower expenses around our patients and individuals.
Mm-hmm. I just want to confirm also for everyone, the technologies for, kind of what you've spoken about, medical IoT devices specifically, not something we're finding on our smartphones today, not something, that's just kind of mass produced at this point with the rings or a watch. They're more specialized healthcare devices.
Yes, definitely. Especially companies that are, I think what you're going to see going forward, we're going to see more solutions and technologies and innovation around patches, wearable patches that could release certain type of therapy. And that's going to connect to maybe your smartwatch going forward, or also with your diagnostic solution. So we're going to have a world where we're going to have all this data that's going to tie in and integrate it, and it'll send that real-time alert to your medical providers.
And then lastly, again, to tie it back to the H-Tech index, where do you, what subsector do you think this generally falls into? Maybe it's a couple of subsectors. We've talked about a couple of companies already specifically, but where do you kind of classify that within health tech?
You would find this in the medical instrument subsector, which is one of our biggest subsector within the H-Tech strategy. You would also see some of these companies have presence in the telehealth. And telehealth, we expect that subsector to grow over time as we see all this innovation happening, as we get more data and analyze this data, and then also be able to enable some of this personalized therapies and medicine to the individuals and patients.
Mm-hmm. And we are seeing some bleed over into the AI index as well.
Yes, exactly. So within the THNQ index, we have as you know, extensive amount of AI scoring in terms of purity of AI revenue. So many of these companies that have the healthcare exposure, they may not have the AI revenue exposure, but we have a really good list right now where we're really being thorough in terms of what companies will make it to the index. But at this time, we have several companies that has the healthcare exposure, companies like Butterfly that's got a strong AI revenues.
Very nice. Zeno, we're going to pivot to you if that's okay. Let's talk about breaking barriers between the physical and digital worlds, augmented reality and virtual reality. Maybe start with some definitions there, and then let's talk through why you think this is an exciting theme for 2023.
Right. So obviously, to take a step back here, it was a big year last year when Meta rebranded as Meta as part of the metaverse. So I think just throw that out there, and then thinking forward, we've got augmented reality and virtual reality. So augmented reality would be an overlaid technology or visual screen, or there are a number of different types of modalities this could occur, maybe on your dashboard, contact lenses or glasses, or a headset, but essentially it's augmenting reality. It's a digital overlay. It could be audio, it could be visual, but ultimately it's a digital understanding of what's happening around you, and the ability for that to provide insights that are customized to you. Virtual reality would be more in a siloed sense of just being in its own virtual world, so not really having anything to do with what's around you, and that could have many different applications, but ultimately it doesn't require as much. There's a lot of processing to create these virtual worlds, but it doesn't require real-time processing of the world around you. So right now you're saying, probably one of the bigger Christmas, holiday gift items would be virtual reality headsets from Facebook or Meta and from Microsoft, and mostly for gaming right now. And so right now, I think a lot of people think of, AR, VR as kind of just a proxy for a new form of gaming, but there's really a lot more to it.
Do you want to take a stab at defining the metaverse?
Sure. I think it's a word that goes way beyond the simplified single word metaverse that we use, but essentially it is there's two different forms of the metaverse. There is the augmented reality metaverse where it actually incorporates and understands the real world. That's physics, chemistry, what items and objects are, and classification of those items and how they interact with the world. And then there's the pure kind of metaverse form that maybe Meta and Zuckerberg would imagine, which is just kind of living and interacting purely in this digital world, which I think is scary to some people that, we're going to be this matrix drone society. But I mean, if you think about how we already communicate and have developed as a society, people have been glued to TVs and PCs, mobile phones, and now we've got smartwatches. They're really just ways of obtaining, communicating, and sharing and having different experiences, whether across different life stages and different forms of entertainment or learning. So I think if you're looking forward, starting next year, you're really going to start to see more news announcements of technology that will be coming on board. Even recently, there were rumors going around that Apple's working on glasses, augmented reality glasses, which we could probably guess would be a little bit better than Alphabet's Google glasses that were released at this point over a decade ago now. So I think it's really not hit people yet that, in a decade from now, people might not be carrying cell phones anymore. We're going to have a different tech modality that's really brought in by the infrastructure and software and many different industries colliding to create a more seamless experience that better integrates into our lives. The average adult Google searches 3 to 5 times a day. That information could be more real time and synced to your daily life, and really benefit people, both kids and teachers, as well as the aging population, on how to navigate the world and get help in real time. So we're really excited about the positive benefits that can occur from the utilization and uptick of this space.
Mm-hmm. So the Trends Report does a really nice job of kind of laying out a lot of applications for augmented and virtual reality technologies. It feels a little bit today maybe like we think that it's all just gaming, and then we imagine ourselves living in a totally virtual world in the future. But there is certainly a spectrum. Do you want to talk about any other of the applications for this technology that's, applicable more today?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the more direct segues from gaming would be education. If you think about how each person learns, they go to a classroom. If they're lucky, they get tutoring. If they're even luckier, they have access to like technology and things that can understand how they learn, what they know, where they progress. And that's both from, a testing side and a learning side. So I think you'll see across numerous disciplines, mathematics, physics, history, there are going to be more and more ways of personalizing this education so they can understand how each individual learns. This can also expand through sports and other physical, learning, such as golf or what have you, where it can understand how you're stroking. You've got, as we covered earlier about wearables, you'll see wearables also applied to this augmented and virtual reality, where it can literally give you visual and voice cues that are automated to help you learn how to do things better, whether maybe even cooking. So I really like education, learning, and coaching. There's also collaboration. I mean, right now we're on this call. We're all in different places, but technically we're here together right now. And the audience here, even if they're here watching this later, they're here in this moment. Where in the future, this collaboration, each one of us is looking at maybe a TV screen or a monitor and looking into a camera. In the future, maybe it'll be even better. Like you'll have more personalized dashboards. More information will be popping up on your screen that kind of prompt you and give you visual cues. And so, even just working together, each person will be able to work in their own style, but each person on the other side of it will also have their own unique angle without impacting the other's experience. So this like personalized custom experience will really improve, organizational collaboration. And then in the real world, kind of going back into the augmented reality side of things, think about just navigating a city or a new experience. Maybe you pull out your phone and figure out how to go on Google Maps. In reality, you'll have this augmented reality headset. You can do this now with Google Maps, where you hold up your phone and it can show you which direction to go, but you're not hands-free. And I think that's the next step, is this hands-free, seamless integration of technology that is designed to help you. I mean, let's hopefully avoid the meta world where it's just flooded with advertisements and it's actually beneficial technology that's giving you the information that you want and need in real time.
Mm-hmm. So this particular conversation feels very specific to Think, THNQ, the AI index. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but are there any particular companies also that you're really excited about?
Yeah, I think I'll quickly add another area. You mentioned, this is definitely a very AI focused. AI is empowering the technology to create, understand, and implement this, the infrastructure and application side. But there's a concept known as digital twin, which is essentially like recreating, and I kind of alluded to this, but it's recreating the physical world and digital world. This could even be for the human body. So think healthcare. So there are lots of applications already currently being developed and deployed, such as navigating the surgical space of understanding and doing pre-op personalized implants that are made using 3D generation software that matches the individual. And so we're already seeing real world impact from this. It just hasn't been called necessarily like AR, VR, which is more of like how we would be using it. So some companies that I'm really excited about that we have exposure to, at Robo would be, on the infrastructure side, none of this would be possible without advanced AI semiconductor chips. So companies like NVIDIA, are making AI chips. They've recently been in the news and part of global trade wars about how powerful these chips are, because they really enable, really fast understanding of, deep learning and how things work. They're faster at crunching these numbers. They're faster at real-time processing, which is important for these applications. I think it's also important to note that NVIDIA isn't just a hardware company. They also have software that they're really diving into deeply. And as an example, they've recently launched a 3D modeling platform, which essentially lets you, type in text and it'll give you 3D mesh modeling that you could actually implement into games or other experiences. So we're really seeing massive progress in the AI space and how it can apply to different subsets of society here. So there's kind of the next step would be the networking and other infrastructure that goes into place, like security. So, let's say you have this AI, you have this augmented reality, you have this, how does it all connect? How does it understand what you're seeing? You need to have sensors and real-time processing. So you've got massive data storage. If we're going basically from a text to image to video to real-time 4D society in the digital, massive data scalability is required and networking capabilities. So you've got companies like Pure Storage and Arista Networks that are really powerful plays here. On the other side, you're going to have in the computer vision for the augmented reality. So, companies like Umbrella, which we've mentioned in other trends, I think that's one thing to highlight real quickly is that while we're talking about these trends, we try to find companies that are already powerful and market leaders and have great technology, but they're actually able to play into different mega trends that could see massive, $1 trillion, $5 trillion markets that are not in existence today, really. So I wanted to briefly highlight that. So we've got now, networking security. On the security side, we also have cybersecurity. As more and more of our interactions are digitized, as our services that we interact with is automated, our identity and security is very important. Back in the day, and I'm saying this almost facetiously, you would go to a bank in person. There'd be a security guard there. Maybe there's a gold vault. Well, now it's more protecting your digital identity to make sure that you're the person accessing it on your own accord, and that throughout the journey of accessing and transmitting data and money, that there's no third party, accessing this data or manipulating it. And so the cybersecurity component with companies like Cloudflare, that Gen Digital, CrowdStrike are very important and will become even more important as this progresses. I think it would also be remiss to not talk about the companies that have already been building in the 3D space for some time. This would be companies like Dassault, Autodesk, Adobe, who are basically pioneers and leaders in the digital 3D space. But I think I'll also briefly talk about, I've mentioned Meta in this call, and we actually don't hold Meta. They're really a, very consumer-focused advertising company, and that's the core of their revenue. We would rather hold Microsoft as a, metaverse play and in general AI play, because we believe they're making much better moves as an AI company, as a metaverse play, with their partnerships with OpenAI for enabling these newer technologies to actually be in the hands of individuals and consumers in a more positive, impactful way. So, we have Microsoft in our AI Think Index. I think that covers most of the subsectors here, but, I have to say that almost all of them in some way will come to play into this space at some point in time.
All right, the last question I have for you, then we'll move back to Jeremy and talk reshoring. This particular section of the trends report does have a lot of focus on venture capital investing in these startups over the last year, or really 2 years maybe. Do you see our index constituents making acquisitions? Do you see companies actually, IPOing into this space that could be potential index constituents? Any sort of trends you're watching for next year?
Yes. So ultimately around, the startups in the space and metaverse, 3D imaging, modeling, it all comes down to really AI. AI is the component that's going to give these companies a leg up or advantage in developing and deploying these technologies. That also is looking at, the infrastructure plays, the connectivity to allow real-time connections between the devices that we will be wearing and the back-end cloud infrastructure. In terms of acquisitions, we're already seeing, M&A in the space across security, across AI. There are a lot of startups that are developing this space, but I think people also discount and maybe fear at the same time what companies like NVIDIA are capable of doing. With their recent 3D modeling mesh development they just pushed out. That probably just knocked out a lot of startups out of competition by itself. So I think it's important to look at which companies actually have really defensible tech that will be acquired by these big tech companies, because they will look to rapidly develop and maintain share as the world switches over to this new paradigm.
Which is why market and technology leadership are key in our constituent investment process. All right, Jeremy, let's talk about reshoring. Reshoring is the final of our themes that we're looking at for 2023. We've talked about semiconductors a lot here today, and we've actually had the CHIPS Act passed in 2022. That will be reshoring a lot of semiconductor manufacturing. But talk generally about the reshoring trend that you see for the next year.
Okay. Well, look, I think one of the most important turning points in the global macro is about the end of globalization and really a change in that trend that has kind of peaked over the last 5 years or so. And so started a few years ago with the commercial trade war between the US and China. We had the pandemic. Now we have geopolitics coming to the forefront. And so our view is that the trend of reshoring is going to gain traction, and is increasingly clear evidence of that. So you mentioned the CHIPS Act, that's one, but a series of major US policies enacted in the past few months are really pointing towards that. And we think that this trend will create a major tailwind for robotics and industrial automation. And it's not like automation needs a booster in the current environment, because when you think about the problems we're facing today, the labor shortages, inflation, rising costs across the board, the one clear answer to that from a business leader's perspective has been, automating. And so corporations have started investing at a much faster pace over the past 2 years. In fact, demand for automation today is at record highs. and it's growing, and there's more demand for robots and automation than providers can supply. But in addition to that, those macro changes around globalization or the end of it are going to have a very important impact. This is protectionism, deglobalization. We can call it friendshoring or reshoring from China into the higher cost locations in Europe and the US. You have the aging of population, the restriction of migration, the impact of global climate change, cyber warfare, as just touched on cybersecurity. All of that is really leading to much more conscious effort to manufacturing locally. And robotics automation is the enabler of that. This is the enabler of competitive manufacturing. And again, we're already spending unprecedented amounts on that. In fact, in the second quarter of the year, robotics orders in North America were up 25% year on year. And in the first quarter, they were up 28%. So we're off to a very, very strong year in 22. And we think that trends will continue into the next few years.
Major companies benefiting from that trend. And then the next question I'm going to ask you, any specific industries you really see leaning into reshoring?
Yeah, so the beneficiaries are some of the usual suspects, like the leading robotics companies like Fanuc or Yaskawa in Japan, ABB in Sweden, Switzerland. You have KUKA, also one of the top players in industrial robots. But you also have the companies that participate in automation control systems like Rockwell Automation here in the US. You'll have the computer vision players like Cognex, collaborative robots, companies like Teradyne that owns Universal Robot, that's got the top market share in collaborative robots that can work alongside humans on the workshop. So those are some of the obvious one, but there's a series of secondary beneficiaries. You think about the actuation, you think about the control system, the software layer that Zina also talked about.
Any specific industries that you see reshoring the trend really accelerate in the near term? Obviously, it sounds like basically everything could be impacted, but in the more near term, maybe in 2023.
Yeah, so the most obvious one to everyone is semiconductors, right? Because we just had the CHIPS Act passed, and that's earmarking, $40-50 billion towards domestic manufacturing of chips. And immediately following this announcement by the White House, we've seen major announcements from Micron and Qualcomm and Taiwan Semiconductor, all building new multi-billion-dollar plants. And so all the infrastructure that's going to support this is coming along as well. Then we had the 2021 Infrastructure Act that's also allocating billions of dollars to high-tech infrastructure across the country. There's a major push towards electric vehicles that we already talked about. And it's important for investors to understand that the manufacturing of electric vehicles implies a lot more automation than traditional cars. And that's because the intensity of the use of robotics to manipulate batteries, for example, or the whole electric powertrain manufacturing requires more robots, more control systems. So that's another major tailwind here.
Yeah, sounds like this high conviction theme is going to be heavy in the robo index with some crossover again into maybe AI specifically.
Yes, I agree. Robo has very direct exposure to all we just talked about, from the industrial automation to the control systems, the computer vision, the actuation. But there's also going to be some AI elements to it. So you'll find some degree of exposure in the AI index as well.
Well, I want to break because I want to open up the floor to questions. Also, I want to remind everyone listening that if you'd like to receive kind of regular updates from us, you can sign up for our newsletter. So while we continue to collect any questions from the audience, I just wanted to start with a couple easier ones. And then really, it looks like these are focusing on the robo portfolio or portfolio construction. First question, do you think that drone delivery is realistic at scale? Are there examples of drones actually making deliveries right now?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we get that a lot.
Yeah.
We talked about drones earlier in the presentation. Today, there is no commercial drone delivery service that exists primarily because of regulatory hurdles. But there's a lot of major players that are experimenting with this and that have that target of turning this into a commercial service. So one can think about Amazon, that's presented already a lot of concepts around that, but also in the real world has demonstrated the possibility of doing that, and particularly in remote places. I can also think about some more anecdotal use cases in other regions where the regulation is not as strict. And so we've seen some NGOs, for example, use drone deliveries in places like Africa for healthcare products and vaccines and things like that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take this next one because I don't think we want to be in the endorsement business, but we had a question come in about a healthcare app or a fitness-focused wearable that we like to use right now. I'm not a huge fan. I barely get my watch on every morning, but I do have a team member whose wife is pregnant right now, and she tracks her heart rate every day, just using a simple Apple Watch, and then has that conversation. She takes all that data in, talks with her doctor about it every time she goes in for an appointment. So there are some practical uses even just with an Apple Watch right now. Question for you about tech investors. So tech investors this year has obviously been a tough one in the markets. They've really abandoned that kind of growth at all costs mindset and are really looking more for companies with profitability and good quality. So can you talk about the quality of our indexes?
Sure. Well, that's a good question. I want to start by talking a little bit about our index construction methodology that really starts from the research step. And so we research and score every company in our investment universe that touches on the subjects we've been talking about today: robotics, automation, AI, healthcare technology. And we score these companies first on their exposure to the theme where we want to express a bullish view on. And secondly, on the technology and market leadership. So technology leadership meaning a track record of innovating and bringing new products and services to market that help the company dominate its sector. And market leadership being a traditional market share assessment, not only the absolute market share, so we're looking for market leaders, but also the momentum in the market share. Is the company gaining share? And so generally those two factors, technology leadership and market leadership, translate into strong financial performance. So if you look at the Robo Index and the H-Tech Index or the Think Index through the prism of traditional investment factor analysis, what you'll find is that the three portfolios tend to score very high on quality, and that the companies in those indices have typically fat margins, strong balance sheets, high return on capital. In fact, if you look at Robo, you'll find that more than 90% of the companies in the index are profitable, so only less than 10% are not profitable today. And they tend to have very strong cash flow and strong balance sheets as well. So yes, it's more about quality than growth at any cost, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think we have time for one more. I have a few sitting outstanding. I will get back, or we will get back to people individually if we can't answer live here. But I wanted to ask you, since these are thematic indexes, what percentage of the companies in the indexes are international? And has that percentage really changed much over time? Robo obviously has almost 10 years of a track record. And then Think and H-Tech a little bit shorter, but if we could talk about international exposure, that'd be helpful.
Yes. So the reality is that a lot of the technology and market leaders are located outside of the United States. And for certain areas, like when you think about computing or software, the US is very strong. So you'll find a lot of companies involved in those types of business models are in the US. But a lot of the market and technology leaders in things like highly engineered components that go into robots or factory automation are outside the US. And so when you look at Robo, in fact, more than half of the Robo index is composed of international stocks. And the exposure to US is around 45, and then you have 12 different countries that are represented, and a lot of them in Asia. So Japan alone accounts for about 20% of the Robo index. Then you'll find companies from countries like Switzerland and Germany and Korea and Taiwan. So definitely a high international exposure, relatively similar to what you'd find in a global equity portfolio, in fact, with the US around 45. And H-Tech and Think are more US-centric. And so typically international exposure will be somewhere between 20 and 25% for these two.
Okay, thank you. Very nice. Jeremy, I think we're right up against our timeline. So thank you to you. Thank you to your team for speaking with us today. Anyone with questions outstanding, we'll get back to you directly. Thank you for participating today. If you have further questions, you can submit them either through the website, which is just roboglobal.com. That's also where you can find the trends report and a replay of this call, if that would be helpful to everyone.